Welcome to MidwestHammer, a Warhammer podcast for experienced and new Warhammer nerds alike, hosted by two wonderful Midwesterners. I am your first host and Imperial historian, Sanguine.
And I am Fathom, your resident skinwalker and host. I am here to learn just as much as you guys. I have some knowledge of the Tau and have some limited knowledge on other topics. Now time for a quote.
Empires, monuments, and legends are built by those who are merely victorious. We are born to kill, not to build. We are not idle long enough to leave monuments, and we leave no work of the enemy intact to spawn legends. We are the First Legion, and he that follows in our wake is death. Hector Thrain, keeper of the Black Gate and first master of the First Legion. Today we will be discussing the lore of the Dark Angels and their primarch. I will have to paraphrase a bit, so just a warning, due to time constraints, I won't be able to cover everything. The lore of the Dark Angels is vast, and so is the list of characters they have. To start, their primarch is Lionel Johnson. They are the First Legion, hailing from the Night Forest World / Death World of Caliban. The Dark Angels' current home is the fortress monastery known as the Rock, which is a massive shard of a destroyed Caliban, which we will discuss momentarily. Their current chapter master in the 41st millennia is a gentleman named Supreme Grandmaster Azrael. The chapter in Legion, instead of being split into companies, is generally split into wings, large groups of dedicated types of Space Marines, such as the Death Wing, which is dedicated mostly to their Terminator veterans, the Raven Wing, which is dedicated primarily to Assault Marines, and the Green Wing, which is primarily dedicated to their regular Space Marines.
So, as someone who's heard of a lot of material from the series and knows a lot more for its video games and animations that have come into the popular consciousness, I hear a lot of the talk of I believe in the first Space Marine game when they talk of when they have a narration over the drop pods / drills that are dropping down. They say we are the sons of Caliban. Is that? I guess they take a lot of pride in the fact they come from Caliban, even though it's destroyed.
I believe you are referring to the Space Hulk Deathwing game.
Yes.
But yes, they are referring to their ancient homeworld, which we will discuss very momentarily. To begin, I'm going to start with their primarch. Lionel Johnson, when the primarchs first gathered by the Chaos Gods. Okay, well, actually, for a bit of context, just to for our newer fans, there's this gentleman named the Emperor of Mankind.
Bit of an important figure.
His goal was basically to unite humanity, and he created 18 or 20 sons to lead basically super soldiers into the task of unifying the entire galaxy in his name. And these were Space Marines, and we will be discussing the Space Marine legions in particular in order. And their primarchs, which the primarchs are the individuals that are his gene sons. And the one in particular we'll be talking about today will be Lionel Johnson, and he's in his Dark Angels. So, the Great Crusade is the act that they take upon, where they are unifying the entire galaxy in the name of humanity, and particularly the Emperor. And generally, these events will lead to another war called the Horus Heresy, which is when 9 of the sons revolted against the other, and the Emperor himself. So, we will discuss more on these topics as we go along with the episode and along with the series. But Lionel Johnson, when all the Primarchs were scattered by these 4 gods called the Chaos Gods, was sent to a medieval world named Caliban. And this medieval world is also just as much a death world, so it's very dangerous. It's a Caliban was a dangerous world dominated by a vast array of massive beasts and populated by a series of knightly orders dedicated to hunting the foul beast of Caliban. The young lion lived for part of his youth as a wild boy braving the wilds of Caliban. He was eventually found by an influential knight called Luther. Luther adopted the boy, and the order of knights that Luther was a part of began to teach the lion a lot of what they knew. But the boy grew fast, having an impressive intelligence and massive size and unkempt ambition as well. The lion eventually united the knightly orders of Caliban on the idea of forever ridding Caliban of the beast. Years of crusading and fighting eventually reduced the numbers of the beast to complete extinction, but along the way, he learned harsh realities. He had to put down many who schemed against him. Growing cold and merciless, he did this with little common or little concern, for his great vision was of a peaceful and calm Caliban, which in his mind needed to be reached at all cost.
So basically, the goal being just trying to absolve Caliban of its
Of
current
the reign of terror.
problems with
Yeah.
beasts. And then, of course, when they tried to come past this, there were some issues along the way with the people themselves that they were working with.
Yeah, just imagine you're a proud knightly order, and then someone who you've never met before until he starts like walking up with an army and asking you to join him, tries to tell you what to do. A lot of them said no. Uh, it took generally a lot of convincing. He was mostly diplomatic for a long time about it. Eventually, when people started rebelling against him, just for the sake of being greedy, power and power hungry as most humans are, he would eventually get to the reality that he needed to be just harsh enough to teach them lessons about why exactly it was necessary for this vision to be instilled. Which, I mean, these knightly orders, all they've known for the entirety of their existence, thousands of years per at least that we know of, was fighting these beasts. So it's of great concern to them that most of their culture is going to be gone when the beasts are gone as well.
It's more what I was hinting at with there's situation that the world has been hinged on is a world of constantly fighting these beasts. And at that point, kind of becoming relying on the culture and the lifestyle that the beast fighting the beast imposes on them.
And
Then all of a
also the
sudden you have,
general order, yeah.
yeah,
But
and of course power structures. But then you have one random person that is just seems to excel in being a knight every stature, very convincing,
very large.
rising through the ranks very quickly, very large, of course. Just to put this out into the consciousness, Space Marines are, even from my limited knowledge, very big
Well,
compared to people.
this is a primarch. This is a gentleman who is bigger than most Space Marines. He's the primogenitor. He's the guy they take the DNA from to make other Space Marines, or to make Space Marines in general. Primarchs are a league above their sons, which they
Yeah,
will all view their primarchs as fathers, or gene fathers at least, depending on the legion. But they will dedicate themselves to the kind of to these gene fathers just as much as to the emperor himself, in some cases more.
no, very obviously.
Yes,
Um,
but yeah, the whole kind of culture of Caliban kind of relied on the existence of these beasts, which the in all in all fairness to the lion, his goals were ambitious and they were noble, and he did achieve them eventually, just at a great cost to the kind of order of Caliban, which in some ways kind of come back to bite him, but it also is very important to his backstory as a Primarch in future. correlating to future events as well. But in the meantime, the Terranborn, which Terra is Earth, Space Marines of this legion were amongst the first Space Marines to join the Emperor's side, fighting in the later days of the Unification Wars, where the Emperor united Terra, being an instrumental part in the destruction of the primogenitors to the Space Marines, the Thunder Warriors, alongside the Custodians, which are the Emperor's personal gene-customized guard on Terra.
I have a question. Since it's the first Legion we're covering, could we explain how, since all the Primarchs were kind of just scattered about in a chaos plot, how was Lionel taken back into the fold?
Eventually, all of the Primarchs were found by the Emperor on his Great Crusade. We will discuss he was found. The Lion in particular is shrouded in a little more mystery than some of the other Primarchs that we will talk about. Mostly because he was a very silent man, very stoic. He wasn't much about bragging for himself. He didn't turn down honors, but was not one for bragging by all means.
Hmm.
Yeah. But the Terran-born Dark Angels, or as they were more aptly known at the time, Angels of Death, fought alongside the Emperor in the Great Crusade, in search of their Primarch, uh, often adorning skulls on their armor, and other talismans, which served a dual purpose of striking fear into their enemies and maintaining the secrets of the Legion by pushing away mortals around them. The Lion Albeit the lion was eventually found, he was found a little later than some other Primarchs, like Horus was the first. The lion was eventually found at 846 M30, so Millennium 30, year 846. And some of his first acts as the Primarch were to change the Legion to reflect more of a knightly order, and changing their name over to the Dark Angels as opposed to the Angels of Death, and making their culture of the Legion reflect the knightly orders of Caliban, which, albeit just as much as the Angels of Death preempt to them, were very, very, very secretive, just as much so as or more than the than the Legion itself. So that kind of culture of secrecy kind of pervades the Legion and the chapter to this day.
So from what I understand, they just, even compared to the normal amount of secrecy that is kept about these like legions at the time, uh, Lionel brings with him more of a knightly culture and attitudes towards a lot of his leadership that are rather far away from the public view, very, very contained.
Well, the structure
But
of the
then,
Dark Angels was to shroud them a little bit in mystery, so that enemies that fought them would know little about them until they were in conflict. But a lot of the strategies of the Dark Angels reflect kind of a hit hard, hit fast, kind of a usually close combat doctrine, and they're generally not known to retreat too often from fights. Very, very committed to the conflicts that they are in, and almost to their detriment in some points. But they generally have a tendency to fight more in the melee combat kind of and knightly aesthetic towards is what they lean towards for most of their time. So
their general style of attack is just take advantage of the enemy's ill knowledge of them, press hard, press forward, get the objective complete before they can adapt or
yeah, and
change their strategy against.
the lion was a fairly good commander as well. He had generally a lot of experience in fighting due to the kind of baiting and crusading against the beast of Caliban. So he was He was no like strategic. Like he was one of the best strategists among the primarchs. Arguably just as good, if not better, than Horus. But
Hmm.
he kind of lacked in charisma. What he lacked in charisma, he made up for in just pure raw skill. So Horus was someone who could please literally anybody he talked to. The lion, on the other hand, would often come off as very cold, very ruthless, and this often once again worked to his detriment, especially when interacting with his brothers.
Yeah, interlegion politics, inter
Diplomacy and
diplomacy, it just not their specialty.
they don't work well with others. And this is a common theme amongst the Dark Angels to this day is that they, at least for the most part, don't tend to work well with others. Obviously, they can do it if they have to, and they do all right, but they prefer to work alone, to maintain their secrecy and as well to maintain their just kind of general fighting style and just the general kind of antisocial behavior of the Lion during the Great Crusade wasn't too helpful for working together as well. So, but yeah, one of the first well-recorded campaigns of the Dark Angels with their Primarch was the Compliance of Molech, where they worked alongside the Luna Wolves, the Emperor's Children, the White Scars, where they're
So
where the
big joint mission.
and in this
Big big joint.
we will talk about those other legions in the future episodes, but in this conflict, the Emperor was fighting alongside them, and the main story of this, because the compliance went fairly well, so not a huge amount to talk about when it comes to the its standard kind of just drop in, kill everything that's not loyal to the Emperor and probably also not human. The Emperor did, in fact, during this time, enter a mysterious warp portal, and then he was in there for just a few minutes, as far as everyone around him was aware. Then he came out of the warp portal, appearing older but more powerful. Although a large footnote in the history of the Dark Angels, it paled in comparison to the Rangdan Xenocide, of which there is sadly little information. But the First Legion came out of the war with a severely depleted numbers, supposedly losing as much as 50,000 Space Marines. This was a hard-fought victory, reducing them below the numbers of other legions, such as the Ultramarines, which will be discussed in a future episode. So they fought this giant, pretty much extermination campaign against a group called the Ringdang, of which there is basically no information about, thanks to the way that 40K writes them. And I mean, there's like limited information, but almost none of it is useful. So, or
So what are the Rangdang?
just they were super powerful aliens that gave the Dark Angels a massive run for their money. So it was exactly what they were. I think they were just kind of like big beasts, but they were also fairly intelligent and had some pretty disturbing powers. I think a good part of it might have been mind control. I'm not too familiar on the lore of the Ringding Xenocide personally, but it was an influential thing that basically backseated the Dark Angels for not too long, but it did play a role in Horus becoming the War Master in the future, which is a role of taking over the Great Crusade when the Emperor eventually returned to Terra to do other things. But many other compliance campaigns were fought, and a growing friendly rivalry with the Space Wolves was developed, and a tradition of dueling whenever they met, as both the Lion and Lehman Russ were got themselves locked into a duel which lasted 24 hours over the execution of a person that was I think it was a governor that was rebellious against the Imperium and basically a taunted Lehman Russ. The Lion thought it was stupid to get angry over such a simple thing, so he just executed the governor. And this led to a 24-hour fist fight slash duel between Lehman Russ and the Lion, where both of them declared themselves the victors of the duel, and then neither side thought that they won in private. So, and then from then on, anytime the Space Wolves and the Dark Angels meet, they customarily have a duel reenacting the fight between their primarchs. Which
Interesting.
Lehman Russ is basically this half wolf man that is very good fighter, but so is Lehman, or so is the Lion. So it was a very generally fair fight. Uh, I think if it was an actual like battle to the death, I would have to put my money on the Lion if I'm being honest. Which we'll talk
Yeah.
about more of his duels later. There was an incident at some point. I'm not quite sure the exact years and dates on this, but the Lion was negotiating with an enemy of the Imperium, a particularly powerful Xenos like accepting sect of humanity, and the group thought that the Lion, they didn't particularly care for the Lion and the Dark Angels. They thought they were not working for the betterment of the galaxy. So they snuck a bomb onto the Lion's flagship at the time. And his adoptive father Luther that we mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
His adoptive father Luther found the bomb and hesitated, tempted to let it explode. He was later found pondering this idea still, out of what we can only presume to be simple greed, because he was jealous of the Lion's big role in the galaxy and the Great Crusade as a whole, and he wanted potentially to take over the place of the Lion. He was found by another Dark Angel, and as a punishment for his hesitation, he and a few other Dark Angels that were known to be friends with Luther were banished back to Caliban just to basically sit out the Great Crusade for a little while and recruit more legionaries. Which this event in particular will play a large role in the Dark Angels, as we will discuss later. So, do you have any questions as of right now?
So basically, so basically, during the Great Crusade, the Dark Angels came upon many, many problems.
Uh,
Uh,
they had a lot of victories as well. It's just the losses kind of played a bigger influence in what eventually happened and to the Legion and the Horus Heresy as a whole. But they were one of the most successful legions. I don't want to underplay how good they did in the Great Crusade. They, just because of their immense size of the legion, because it was one of the biggest legions, if not the biggest, for a while. They were able to conquer many of planets in the name of the Emperor. But the few kind of rough victories that they had, like the Rangan genocide, where they didn't technically lose, but they also didn't win, were kind of the things that set up the issues that would arise later. So the another theory, a theory that some people have proposed is that the emperor knew who was going to be the the traitor. He knew that whoever he picked for War Master would betray the Imperium, and this is just hearsay and fan theory, but that's potentially why he picked Horus as the War Master over the Lion, because the Lion was so competent and powerful, but also not very charismatic. So he may have potentially driven more people over to chaos just by his brash, kind of harsh nature.
Well, like, wouldn't more people be dragged out? Like, wouldn't it be better if like an uncharismatic leader was picked so that they would just be them
Well, that's
pushing over
just
the chaos?
a fan theory. In reality, Horace was a better pick just because he was more charismatic. So Horace's legion was also one of the more successful legions as well. They didn't particularly like submit an entire segmentum like Ultramar into the Imperium at their birth or reunite when they were united with their Primarch, but they were one of the more effective combat forces. The Sons of Horus were. So to their detriment, the Dark Angels lost a lot of their Marines, and their Primarch, the Lion, wasn't particularly charismatic. So that is almost why that he most certainly was passed over for the War Master position for that reason.
Well,
Which to the Dark Angels' credit, they like I said they did do very well in the Great Crusade, and the Lion but the Lion did not take that whole War Master thing very well. Like when the Horus Heresy broke out, and Horus was like he heard Horus betrayed the Imperium. He
yeah.
took it personally as he didn't see any of the other legions as like a problem because he was just like, oh, I'm just focused on the betrayal of Horus right now. Which he would later come to regret both that mindset because he did attack loyalist forces and that he believed were in the way on a few occasions. So until he met up with some of the other loyalist legions, he just kind of was in a rush to blame Horus for everything, which he came to his senses fairly quickly as well. But getting more into the Dark Angels' role in the heresy, they were Horus intentionally sent the Dark Angels as far away as possible before the heresy began. They were sent to the eastern fringes, and Horus dispatched Conrad and his Night Lords to launch hidden run campaigns against the Dark Angels on their return back to slow down the Dark Angels. And it worked for a time, even spurring a deep hatred for Conrad and the Lion. The Dark Angels eventually, in a series of decisive actions, were able to catch out the Night Lords, and a duel between Conrad and the Lion ensued. Conrad's future seeing abilities were not able to give the Night Haunter a serious advantage. The Lion was able to subconsciously change his attacks mid-swing, eventually getting the better of Conrad and giving him the Bane treatment. Which, if you don't know what that is, he literally grabbed him, held him up in the air, and cracked his spine.
Damn.
Uh, Conrad would be captured and and put on the Dark Angel ship and brought back to Ultramar, where he would later wake up and escape the Dark Angel ship, and would harass the crew on the entire way there, pretty much. The Lion, after defeating Conrad in his duel, pushed through the warp storms made by Lorgar and his or instigated by Lorgar, Erebus, and the Word Bearers, and he made it to Ultramar, met up with Sanguinius and Gilliman, the three, not knowing if the Imperium had fallen or not, established a organization called the Imperium Secundus, which, if you know Latin, means second. So after that they declared Sanguinius as the emperor. Conrad did end up managing to escape the Lion's ship and started to torment the population of Ultramar. The Lion, in his infinite and divine wisdom, did everything in his power, including war crimes, to recapture Conrad. So he would burn out civilian areas just to push Conrad out into the open. And he eventually did find capture Conrad. He had Conrad at his mercy. Conrad begged for death, but was only met by a fist of of the angry Lion seeking to capture Conrad due to his brother's pressures. The trial of Conrad was long and drawn out. Conrad's only defense to his crimes of torture and terrorism were that it was by the Emperor's design.
The Emperor made me do it.
Well, it's debatable, but it's weird that that could technically work as a defense for Conrad because I mean we will discuss the Night Lords later, but they basically were designed by the Emperor to be to submit people but via terror. But Conrad Conrad himself also just kind of the entire time babbled about prophecies and things that he saw in his future visions, including his own death at the hands of the of an imperial assassin. This kind of went over everyone's head at the moment because they were more worried about prosecuting the war criminal. Uh,
They kind of ignored the fact that an Imperial assassin would be killing him.
yes, in his own visions, but that we'll get back to that later. So Conrad also during this entire trial did mention the fact that the lion had used some questionable methods to capture him, which Gilliman and Sanguinius, enraged by the truth, that truth, banished the Dark Angels and the lion from Imperium Secundus. Before,
Literally, its creation within like 5 minutes, and you're already getting kicked out.
yeah, I mean, fairness deserved.
Yeah, absolutely. But
Gilliman was very protective of Ultramar, and Imperium Secundus was mostly Ultramar, and he did kill a lot of civilians in the pursuit of finding and capturing Conrad. Uh, so yeah, the lion kind of reflects over this. He kind of understands why he's being punished for it. He gets kind of sad about it and remorseful about, and also about banishing Luther and all that. But he in this like moment of like clarity and like depression, it just snaps in his head. Oh my God! Conrad said an imperial assassin sent by the emperor would kill him, and that is how he would die. So he immediately rushes back to where Gilliman and Sanguinius are in Imperial Secundus. He showed up. Obviously, the other two weren't too happy about him showing back up, but then he over a long debate convinced them and told them about what Conrad had said, and basically I just imagine it as him emphasizing the same phrases over and over again, being like, he said that the assassin sent by the Emperor would kill him, and then everyone just kind of realized, oh, so that means the Emperor must still be alive, which once you realize how Conrad died, it wasn't technically the Emperor that sent him. It was because the Officio Assassinorum had the blessing of the Emperor at the time. Uh, so they kind of just rushed on a hunch to back to Terra, which they're basically halfway across the galaxy at this point. So and there are a bunch of warp storms. So pushing through all this and all the chaos, warriors like fucking or Chaos Space Marines and then Chaos Cultists and worlds that were in their way. It took a very long time. But in the meantime, before I go too deep into that, the response to Conrad, they were going to execute him before the lion came back. But instead, Sanguinius said, "Oh, well, you love your prophecy so much. I'm going to allow you to have that death." And then he just jettisoned him in a cryopod into space. So Sanguinius did a funny. I just thought I'd mention that because it is an interesting part about the trial of Conrad.
wouldn't shut the fuck up. Oops. Wouldn't.
But
Whoops. Sorry. After imagining that, that's the only wording that came to mind. Just a complete rant about possible futures and the imperial. You're gonna have to bleep that one out. Sorry about that one, but that is the only explanation of just what I would be thinking of is sitting in that room listening to.
It is curious because Sanguinius is one of the nicest Primarchs. So he kind of was just getting annoyed with the idea of the fact that his brother betrayed him. So he was just like, all right, I'm upset that I have to do this, but goodbye. You're gonna get what you want, and then just jettisoned him out of a ship in the orbit.
I think I was empathetically connecting with Sanguinius's annoyance at the situation.
I can imagine. Conrad was a kind of a rambling schizophrenic by this point.
Like, imagine trying to listen to someone describe to you like probably
Their
months
own
of
death.
visions
Yeah.
about their own death, about various visions, and you're just like, you don't even know what they're talking about. Because
Yeah.
just to
Well,
be clear
you
here,
know, you
no one
know,
else in the Imperium really has the ability to see the future,
no
right?
correction. Sanguinius does. So
Really?
Sanguinius is someone who can relate to it, but Sanguinius saw his own death, and he saw himself saving the Emperor, which is why Sanguinius just he kind of had a nicer outlook on his whole future sight. Like he just thought of it as, oh well, this is fate. I'm gonna try my best to manipulate it in a good way. It may not be certain, but I'm gonna keep my chin up while doing it. Which is why Sanguinius's death was so tragic, is because he knew he was going to die.
But to be fair,
Put in
on
a
one
good
hand,
effort not to
Conrad,
die as well.
yeah, but like also like Conrad's vision was of being betrayed by the Imperium because obviously being killed by an Imperium assassin. Meanwhile, like Sanguinius's vision was pretty much in line with what is
But
the best case scenario for a death for a living man, like a living
in
weapon.
in fairness, Conrad's death was a self fulfilling prophecy because, for one, the like prophecy and future seeing in Warhammer is not necessarily a for sure thing. So like it can be changed. Fate is not a linear path. It generally tends to be fairly accurate what you see, but like for instance, Conrad didn't have to let an assassin kill him, but we will talk about that in the when we get to the Eighth Legion. That's a topic for another day, sadly. Because I could talk about Conrad all day. He's one of my favorite Primarchs, just simply due to the tragedy of his life. But going back to where we were, the Dark Angels, the Ultramarines, and the Blood Angels all rushed back to Terra as fast as they could. The Dark Angels and the Ultramarines got bogged down, and them collectively as a group of three, decided that the Blood Angels were going to try to break through the traders and the warp storms and make it to Terra, in which they did. So the Dark Angels eventually decided to stay back and fight any traders they could, and eventually returned to Caliban. They decided to return to Caliban after the scattering, the scattering was when all the traders were decided that the cause of taking Terra was lost, and started retreating back to the Eye of Terra. The Dark Angels did some fighting in this, and they did do a good number on the retreating traders, but then they also the Lion himself and his like big group of Space Marines, uh, which it wasn't all of the Dark Angels, but it was a good chunk of them, decided that they needed to go back to Caliban just to kind of retroactively talk to Luther and make sure that he was doing all right and everything was going well on Caliban.
Yeah.
So we're gonna go back to a few like just before the Horus Heresy now. So when Luther returned to Caliban, he was absolutely disgusted with what had happened to it.
So
Caliban had become a industrial way, like it had become more industrialized. A lot of the forest was taken down because of the fact that they wanted to build and build like weapons and recruit space marines. They focused a lot on converting over Caliban's environment to suit those needs. So Luther, when he
hold
returned,
on.
yes,
Just to like overarching, Luther gets banned like as a punishment for
for
like
almost for almost letting
dedicating
him and the lion die gets bad.
dedicating some thought to letting like everyone perish due to
All
just simply maybe choosing not to activate or
not to
sorry, not to
deactivate.
stop an
Yeah.
explosive that was on a ship. They were sent back to Caliban as their punishment.
Yes,
You don't,
and this
they
was
got kicked off
before
the
the
ship,
heresy started. Like
and
right
now
before.
and then now that they're coming back to Caliban, this is what they see. They see that their like beautiful medieval world
Their
has
beautiful
been like
forest world is being turned into an industrial uh, world to suit the needs of the Dark Angels and the Eternal Imperial Crusade. So Luther, in response, when he starts recruiting new Dark Angels, he kind of corrupts their minds. Now, thankfully, due to the secretive nature of the Dark Angels, this kind of works a little bit, but not completely. So the Dark Angels, when they returned to Caliban, as the Lion did, he found the entire planet aflame. So basically, like just complete destruction. Like it looked like a giant civil war had been waged on Caliban. Which
so post. Is it, this, we're still before
no,
the heresy, right?
we're after the heresy now. So we're
So
jumping
after, so
forward
we're going
again.
back after the heresy, after
The
the
Lion,
traitors have been routed from Terra. They've
yes,
gone back to the Eye of Terror. Everyone's like, okay, we need to go, or at least the Dark Angel's like, yeah, we need to go check up on home. It's
yeah.
been a hot minute. We've done a lot.
So
Let's just go check up on it. And
so when the Lion returns, Caliban looks a little off. It looks a little like bad war battered, and there's fires raging over part of the of Caliban still. Uh, and then when his ship approaches Caliban, the orbital defenses that were installed over the course of the Great Crusade began to fire at the ships that the Dark Angels were in. So
ooh, maybe that Civil War line was a bit more accurate than the Civil War thought was a bit more accurate than intended.
so the Luther and the Lion basically go at each other. In the process, it's believed the Lion orbitally bombarded Caliban, and then also launched an action at the main fortress of the Dark Angels. The planet by
Fortress?
the end of it got shattered,
Oh, wait, what?
and and the battle continued after that, and a large portion of the planet where the final stand of the fallen was taking place, which are the Dark Angels that pledged allegiance to Luther. Uh, they I mean they were launching a final stand, and then the Chaos Gods had decided it would be a big funny to teleport everybody but Luther into the warp. And Luther in the process was captured, but the in the ensuing fighting, the lion had been severely injured, and these creatures called the Watchers in the dark, I think is the name of them, but they're more commonly referred to as the Watchers, which are little like robed very short creatures that are potentially Xeno, but they've been around as myth in Caliban for a very long time. Basically just touched the lion, put him to sleep, and then dragged him into the lower areas of their fortress, which would later be known as the Rock, and would later be converted into a pretty much a giant derelict floating flagship of the Dark Angels. So they would literally take part of Caliban with them as a memorial and as a fortress ship of the chapter.
So
But
they just
Luther would be captured by the Dark Angels, and he would be extensively tortured.
what? Okay, so I'm guessing it's like one of the beasts, quote unquote, like the beasts that were on Caliban for a long time.
What the Watchers?
Basically just yeah, the Watchers.
No, the Watchers weren't really beasts. They because the beasts of Caliban were like big, massive lions, big other creatures, things that were like would actively hunt humans. The Watchers were more of a myth. around the time that the Lion would unite Caliban originally. So the Watchers were just kind of like, oh well, they hide in the walls of the fortresses, and then they occasionally will help people, and like help the knights and give them secret artifacts and things like that. And to an extent, that's basically what the Watchers did when the planet got blown up. Is they just began helping the Dark Angels.
Hmm. What kind of artifacts are we talking about? Or
I
just like mysterious bits and bobs of technology that they didn't
see
fully
that's the thing.
understand.
That's the thing about the Dark Angels is remember the whole secrecy thing. They it's little is known about the extent of what the Dark Angels actually have. Like there are rumors that the Emperor gave them an enslaved man of iron to fight alongside them in times of deep need, which is mega heresy. The Imperium is against AI, so having an enslaved AI is kind of
Yeah,
eh,
it's like there's different levels of heresy. That is baseline level of heresy is a use of
that's not
like
baseline. That is max level.
yeah, no, that is like level zero, tightest circle of heresy.
Yes.
Because here's the thing, like the Imperium uses like some warp magic, which naturally has some chaotic ties to it. So even their like connection to chaos is sometimes a little mixed.
Yeah.
But AI is the one thing that they absolutely have no connection to consciously.
No tolerance for you.
Yeah, no conscious tolerance for it. Just anytime it is found, it is not used. It is
So,
destroyed. And whoever
but the Dark Angels post heresy would be followed by the shame of the fallen, often making worse problems and an unhealthy obsession with the fallen, dedicating themselves in the pursuit of recapturing and torturing and making all of the fallen repent, believing themselves unforgiven by the Imperium and the Emperor as a whole until all of the fallen have been captured and persecuted. And this was their belief for a very long time, and the most of the motivation for I'd say 90% of the conflicts that the Dark Angels were involved in for a majority of for a majority of like post heresy to the times of the like the events of the what is called the what was the book called again? I am blanking for some reason right as I need to know them.
hmm,
The
what relative era?
basically M31 to M41 was basically the entire time that they were, so 10,000 years of obsession, unhealthy obsession with the fallen.
They basically just spent multiple like centuries, these decades, millennium. They spent multiple millennium just searching out the traitorous brothers of Caliban. But I guess my question is, you mentioned that they like when it came down to capturing and actually completing the war, all but Luther were just
Teleported into the
popped into the war.
Yes, they were teleported
What?
into the warp. Some of them are loyal to the Imperium, but disloyal to the Lion. Some of them were loyal to the Lion and the Imperium, but just decided to follow Luther because they didn't know what was going on, and some were just fully dedicated to chaos. So there is a group. There's basically just a wider range of the, like identities and ideologies that the fallen adhere to because they're all separated for the most part. Now there are war bands of the fallen that will fight for chaos, that will fight for the Imperium, separate from the Dark Angels, obviously. But the Dark Angels pretty much have dedicated themselves to hunting down the fallen. Like I said, up until very recently in the lore, because funnily enough, the Lion did come back in the Arcs of Omen books. That's what they were called. So in the Arcs of Omen series, the
Whoa,
storyline
the line.
of the Arcs of Omen, which are the more recent ones,
Whoa,
the
what happened to the line?
Well, the lion was wounded in the fight against the fallen, the original fight where the world was shattered, and then remember the Watchers took him.
Yeah, but what does that entail? Like, did he
It,
just
they
disappear
just put him.
after
They
that?
just had nap time for 10,000 years.
What?
Yeah, they
Okay,
forced him
so
into a healing nap for 10,000 years.
they just stuffed him into the walls of the rock,
Not
apparently.
necessarily the walls, but the bottom of it. Anytime a dark angel would like try to find the the lion, the watchers would basically guide them away from them, just to let him like rest and heal back up. Which his wounds are apparently grievous enough because in his duel with Luther, Luther was empowered by all four Chaos Gods as kind of well, maybe we can have a second Horus moment. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Because Horus by this point is dead. Um,
very dead.
yes, by the time that Luther even like fired upon the ships of the Lion,
Horus definitely
Horus
dies by
died.
the end of the
Yeah.
Horus Heresy.
Yes. But yeah. So the modern Dark Angels for about 10,000 years up until the Arcs of Omen storyline, their major concern was where are the fallen? We'll help out fighting wherever we can, as long as there's maybe a potential chance that the fallen might be nearby. So this is where I got into. There are a bunch of campaigns that the Dark Angels are involved in, a bunch of crusades, but a lot of times they just led back to the storyline of the fallen, which they thought
The
they
Fallen.
so there was literally an entire successor chapter of the Dark Angels that were condemned as heretics because they would refuse to tell the Inquisition what exactly was going on when it came to like why did you abandon this campaign and mind you, most of the Dark Angels don't like the actual like individual Space Marines. No idea what they were abandoning the conflict for. They just knew their chapter master said we got to leave.
Which conflict to be specific?
I am not sure because it is a successor chapter, and I did not do particular research on the successor chapters. But this
But
particular successor chapter was declared heretics, and
but
they were basically function to this day as renegades. But the Dark Angels will just occasionally like throw them equipment because obviously the Dark Angels know they're not heretics. That
yeah,
even though they looked mega shush because to the Inquisition, obviously the Dark Angel leaders know why that chapter was declared heretics. They know that it was over the pursuit of the fallen, and they know that they admire the fact that that chapter was willing to go down, allowing the secret to be hidden still, because the Dark
yeah.
Angels are massively secretive. So a big part of the Arc of Omen campaign and the or not campaign the story is that the Legion of the or the chapter of the Dark Angels, the Rock was Abaddon and this gentleman named Vashtor, the Archifane, were basically working together because Vashtor wants to become the fifth Chaos God, and he is basically the Chaos. He wants to be the Chaos God of machines, which is a whole another topic altogether. But
I mean,
he
you
and a
know,
bunch of Black Legionaries, which are the Sons of Horus, the remnants of the Sons of Horus, and therefore the Prime Traitor Legion, uh, launched an attack on the Rock. The There was a Ark of Omen, which is a big derelict space hulk that Vashtor adds whatever weapons and technology that he can to it. And this particular Ark of Omen that was fighting that they had gotten to the Rock with, which is the Rock is a big chunk of Caliban that's made into a ship. He was able to break past what they called, I think it was the Gorgon something or other, but it's the shield, basically the giant void, like super powered, super secret void shield of the Rock. He was able to fire this weapon 5 times at the void shield of the Rock, and then break through it. In the process, though, he destroyed his own super weapon because just because of the volume of fire that it had to do to break past the rock's defenses,
The
and
the the
then
rate
and then all of the
the
chaos,
volume of fire destroyed
the weapon
the
that was
containment.
firing, yeah, because it was
Damn.
basically it was like firing the Death Star at a giant station or giant ship like 5 times over. Just the volume of fire and how fast they were doing it broke the weapon. The ship was still operational, but the weapon was down. So the Vashtor and the Black Legionaries that were working for him all boarded this ship. They boarded the Rock, where the Dark Angels almost fought to a man. Uh, by the end of it, the Dark Angels were backed all the way to their secret vault, which is I think the Nameless Gate is what it's called. So the Nameless Gate is the entrance to the all the vaults and stuff of the Rock, where the Lion himself and then all the prisoners and all the secrets of the Dark Angels are hidden. And the chapter master Asriel, along with a lot of the other important characters of the Dark Angels, were pretty much backed up against this door, fighting Vashtor and this Chaos Space Marines, basically losing. And then our good boy Be'lakor, the first demon prince, or Be'lakor the Ever Chosen. I think is the Ever Chosen is his name. I might be wrong with that, his nickname. But Be'lakor showed up with his own group of Black Legionaries that had the sigil of Be'lakor on them, and proceeded to start attacking Vashtor's group, and Vashtor had to turn his attention to fighting Be'lakor, and the Dark Angels managed to regroup, rearm, and then also kill a lot of the traitors that were, fighting each other. And the traitor legions decided to retreat after Vashtor basically beat uh, Be'lakor in a duel. It was very close, and
So
neither one
wait,
of them really got any damage done to them. But so Be'lakor and Vashtor retreated off of the rock. The plan for that Vashtor had for the rock and what he needed out of it was completely foiled by Be'lakor. Basically handing
but
Chaos a massive L
wait, why? If they're both chaos forces, then why would they?
because Be'lakor is an asshole.
Okay, being an asshole is not good enough of a reason for completely foiling a massive victory against like the Imperium.
Well, because Vashtor wants to be the fifth Chaos God. Be'lakor also wants to be the fifth Chaos God.
What does Be'lakor want to be the fifth chaos god of?
Uh, I don't know, power, shadows. Like he's a weird individual, but he was the first demon prince, and he was completely chaos undivided demon prince, which is very strange.
You
Uh,
know, I was about to say like I don't want to put this. It's just like
but he basically thwarted the Vashtor's plans because he wanted to put Vashtor back in his place. Uh, and 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 obviously Vashtor goes back to Abaddon very pissed off because Be'lakor is supposed to be an ally of Abaddon as well. So they're both allies of Abaddon fighting each other, but Vashtor wanted none of it, and obviously Be'lakor wanted to basically just put Vashtor back in his place, which was extremely stupid because the entire prophecy that Vashtor is fulfilling is something that could potentially destroy the entire Imperium. So literally Be'lakor just basically just screwed over Chaos for at least another few hundred years. Yeah.
so like I don't want to put this like
All because
major
he's
chaos character lead like
major Chaos character leading an
or
attack on
chaos
on a
champions
rock.
infighting fucked over the
Yes, two major Chaos demons or demon princes and Chaos entity fought each other, and it fucked over the massive plan that and pissed off Abaddon as well. And Abaddon is the ever chosen of chaos right now. So it is just a massive, big go fuck yourself. Is what Bellacore basically just did to everybody.
Well, it just sounds like they just kind of drew back, like, oh, you're gonna become this powerful chaos god? No, 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 that's my spot, buddy. And it proceeds to like
Yes, but
ruin the entire plan of taking the rock.
Bellacore has no strategy in 40k for becoming like taking that place. So it's just kind of it was just kind of stupid, but it's one of those things where it prevented a major death of a major Space Marine chapter, so like the one that people like, which is the Dark Angels, and then it also prevented the ending of the entire setting pretty much. So it was almost a necessity for something to go wrong, but I think it would have been better for the Lion to have woken up before that happened.
Yeah, like maybe the lion wakes up tired,
The
tired of need, all
lion
that.
woke up after. So
Like, well, yeah, I mean, just from what I'm hearing here, it sounds like it would have been better thematically if the lion came back and his nightly near demigod stature of being a primarch and their time of need
oh,
and like scared and like instilling like confusion amongst another chaos troop, so that they did their only understanding is the pure emotion of the chaos god I'm forward. So
yeah.
like just driving them back.
We never did truly mention uh what is that? I never mentioned the Legion colors of the Dark Angels. So the Dark Angels, you'd think by their name that they'd be clad in like black armor or something, which is not entirely untrue of like there's because they have different armor colors depending on their unit. So the Raven Wing actually have black armor, but the base color of the Dark Angels overall is green. Their Legion color is generally a green, or
I thought that was the salamanders.
it's a different shade. It's like a darker, more it, kind of medieval looking shade of green. But it's they also at one point I think during before like pre heresy like Great Crusade I think they had yeah Deathwing Company during the Great Crusade had black, and then I think maybe they might have all just been black during that. No, they weren't. Okay, so the death like certain groups of the Dark Angels had black armor at one point and gray armor. So their armor has changed over time. But the modern Dark Angels use green. So and that's often what they're mostly depicted as. It's a green
Strange.
and I think either yeah, I think it's red usually, yeah. Yeah, green and red. So I think the salamanders are like green. Are they green and yellow? I might be wrong in
Yeah.
saying that, but yeah. But
Well,
no.
they're more green and red.
Also the general aesthetic of both of the legions is completely different because the Dark Angels do have they kind of have a knightly aesthetic. Like also here we're going to talk about the modern inner or the like inner circle as of like the 41st millennia of the I'll just so these are just some general big characters of the of the Dark Angels, which I'm going to mention, and we could do deeper character deep dives and into these characters at later dates if we need to. So the Supreme Grand Master or the Chapter Master of the Dark Angels was Azrael, the Supreme Grand Master. There is also Belial, the Grand Master of the Deathwing. So he's the leader of the Terminators of the chapter. There is Samuel, the Grandmaster of the Raven Wing, or the Assault Brains, so jetpacks, a lot of jetpacks and quick moving units. The Saphon, he is the High Interrogator of the Grandmaster of the Chaplains and Grandmaster of the Chaplains. So all Dark Angels chaplains are called Interrogator Chaplains because their main job during the 10,000 years that the Lion was asleep was to interrogate the fallen for the most part and also preach. So because chaplains. The then there's Ezekiel, the Grand Master of the Librarians. Raziek, the Grand Master of the Apothecarion. Nethor, the Grand Master of the Fleet and Mass. And then there's other captains and other Astartes that are in the what's called the inner circle. But as you can tell, a lot of the names have references to biblical characters, for, particularly like Azrael, I think Sapphon, Samuel, and then there's many others that are not mentioned here, and also Belial and all that. There are a lot of the Dark Angels characters are named after biblical characters. So
Oh, biblical is the thing.
yeah,
I remember getting a warning about the naming.
they are
Now
basic
that I'm thinking about it, they are.
they are basically knightly. They are one of the knightly crusaders kind of space marine groups that exist. I personally, this is where my hatred of the Dark Angels comes into play. Not hatred, dislike of them as an aesthetic is that I just think the Black Templars pull off the whole Crusader biblical knight thing just significantly better because
Well,
I mean that just from their looks, but one is more of like a medieval knightly order, which I think is what the Dark Angels are going for.
yeah,
And then
like
the other one is just pure Crusader order because
yeah, no,
Black
it's
Templars.
completely different times with like
Slightly different
different
times.
completely
I
ideals
wouldn't
of
say
knights
completely.
because the Dark Angels are like the honorable like form of the knight in unironically like in medieval Europe that are up like bigger and stronger. Meanwhile, the Black Templars are just the
Crusaders,
complete
yeah,
like zealous combaticism and to the detriment of the
of
thing that we're crusading against.
the crusade,
Rather,
yeah.
yeah, Dark Angels more esteem themselves on like being grand and standing for their virtues. Meanwhile,
But
the Black
meanwhile,
Templars are like,
the naming convention of the Black Templars is it's very Germanic, so it does have a bit of a nicer kind of more original like feel to it
yeah.
because there are so many biblical references when it comes to the characters of the Dark Angels, but it isn't a bad thing by all means. It's just it, it's it's
Eh.
just a little on the nose, just a little bit.
I mean, I know that if you go like deep into the lore, like in the Warhammer universe, all major religions happened at some point in history. Our history is the history
Is
of
the history of
Warhammer
the
40K.
Warhammer universe up until a
And
certain point, yeah.
technically, the
With some
the Emperor of
deviations.
Mankind might have been Jesus. No one, or might have been other. Maybe just casually
Maybe.
may have just been Jesus.
He
No one really
he
knows because it's so
he
far in the past. No one like.
he definitely seemed to take some influence from both Eastern and European monarchs with not only his naming conventions because okay, so another note, a lot of the biblical names given to the Dark Angels were given some because they were some of the first Space Marines. Some of them were given their names by the Emperor himself. So some of these biblical themes were literally instituted by the Emperor. So to
I
say that
mean,
the Emperor wasn't a philosopher of what we would consider contemporary religious beliefs,
I don't know. Maybe crazy idea here, right? Maybe for someone who like is
is a
so
raging atheist. He didn't
literally an aggressive, combative atheist, maybe they shouldn't be using religious
so many
themes in their naming
biblical
conventions.
and imperialist themes. Yeah, it seems a little on the nose for some reason. But I think it's the hypocrisy of it is intentional. It just kind of adds to the whole like mystery of
I mean, to
what
be
is the
fair,
emperor's
if
motivation.
I was Jesus at one point in my history, I would also name people after religions that like formed around me, or I was the one of the assumed members of.
Well, that's assuming that you're like because if we assume that he is Jesus, the idea of Jesus is not to be like prideful in the names of the existence of his angels. So in like God
Yeah.
isn't like hey I'm gonna name people after my stuff. Obviously people did that anyway, but the church did it anyway. But
Oh yeah.
Jesus himself wouldn't go down to people and be like, "Ah, your name is Azrael."
I mean, he pretty much did that though. Like with some of the naming conventions that you were mentioning. Like I don't know if
I
you know
get
any of the specific names, but he did literally do that. He's just like, your name's gonna be Belial.
Yeah, I don't know, but we're getting off topic for sure. Besides the religious argument, we're gonna. The lion is a very, 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 very cool character. Just his pure dueling prowess, able to counter a Primarch that can see the future by just subconsciously changing his strikes, is something that, for one, only a pure genius and someone with only pure like martial instinct could do. So he is unironically an amazing Primarch. I wholeheartedly think the Lion is one of the best Primarch, with pure skill and power wise. Now, saying that, I dislike the Dark Angels overall up until his resurrection. Well, once again, maybe not dislike, but I think the Fallen thing is a little overplayed. that is my personal take on the Dark Angels. Is they play a lot into the Fallen. Like we didn't cover half of the references to the Fallen that could have been made. We didn't
I
even
mean,
cover 80. We didn't cover 80% of it. There are so many quotes just about the fact that the Dark Angels believe themselves to be unforgiven, which the current Dark Angels that exist before like I said before the Lion came back and brought back the Loyalist Fallen. They literally considered themselves, called in their successor chapters, the Unforgiven.
damn.
Which there were some successor chapters that believed themselves forgiven. There was only one, I think, actually, now that I think about it, which I think was the Angels of. I think it was the Angels of Absolution. I might be mistaken there, so don't get on me too hard. But I do think this is a good end point because I don't want to get too far into just discussing successor chapters because we could always do that at a later date, which there are at least three Dark Angel successor chapters that have, I'd say, a relatively good amount of lore and some deviance away from the general kind of Mafallen kind of storyline. Uh, I've fallen and I can't get up, says Luther.
Shut the hell up. I have fallen and I can't get up.
I have fallen, and none of them are able to repent.
Well, there are some. I think there's a few areas where,
None
like,
shall
okay, don't get me wrong. I
repent.
think we've gotten a pretty good, like, overarching understanding. But I think there are a few areas that do need a little bit more, a little bit more dusting and uncovering. Like, we haven't talked about like the modern area where, like, the
Oh,
is it a like the transition of like the dark angels being like, yeah, we are unforgiven, and we will literally hunt down every single fallen, and until they are all redeemed, and then we will consider ourselves forgiven. To
well,
like,
not even redeemed. What they're looking for is a confession. So they want a confession of traitor of like treacherism from everyone. So they will torture them until they say, "I'm sorry, I repent," and then repentance, and as far as the Dark Angels are concerned, just leads to a swift death. But if you don't repent, it leads to a slow, painful death. So that is the difference. But
it's death versus death.
in a quick note is that the main wings that are left after the Horus Heresy were the Deathwing, Ravenwing, and Greenwing. But before the Horus Heresy, there was also, and during the Great Crusade and all that, and during the Horus Heresy, there was the Dreadwing, the Firewing, the Ironwing, and the Stormwing, which all generally perform different kinds of attacks and like just strategies. But they were all. I mean, generally the strategy of the Dark Angels is just hit hard, hit fast, and try to cut off the head of the snake as fast as possible.
How have the dark angels changed since Lionel came back? Because obviously, like, They just
Well,
assume that he
the
died during the
like
civil war
well, he
of
didn't die. He just got
Caliban.
comed. Yeah, but
Well,
the Lion.
yeah, but they kind of assumed he died.
Nah, I think the inner circle knew that he was technically asleep. But yeah, but only the inner circle technically knew about the fallen after the first generation of the Dark Angels that fought during the Great Crusade died off. So, but yeah, no, the I think the idea that the Lion is brought back, he's generally like working to reunite the kind of the Legion as a whole. To the contrary to what I'm sure Gilliman wants. He's kind of like, okay, well, we're gonna bring all the fallen back into the fold as long as they're, for one, not chaos corrupted, for two, still loyal to the Imperium, and this is an important thing, is that there are some fallen characters that are very cool and very interesting that didn't have time to discuss, like a gentleman named Cipher, which was basically just loyalist fallen, uh, kind of sneaky guy that went around and did espionage and stuff.
Makes sense.
He's basically like a weird double agent. But yeah.
So, what was the motivation? Since they're like a big crux, a big crux of like what the Dark Angels is about. What was like the main motivation for the Fallen to like actually become Fallen and like follow Luther in
Luther.
the
Yeah.
Luther in
Uh
the Civil War?
well, there was the whole status of what Caliban looked like when they came back. There was some were just recruited by Luther and were influenced by him. Some some just had no idea what was going on and saw people shooting at ships in orbit, said okay, and then got attacked by the loyalist and said, okay, well, I must fight for my life now. So there's not really one motivation in the Fallen, which is why the probably the only interesting part about the Fallen the Fallen storyline is that you get different characters with different motivations. Like Luther is a chaos worshiper for sure, but like not every Fallen was a chaos worshiper.
Well, I thought his motivation was just like, oh, our planet looks terrible. We need like a
Yeah, but he
restoration
he
effort.
was manipulated by the chaos gods and into chaos worship after that. Which
I mean, to be
Caliban,
fair,
to be fair,
our
in all fairness, the beast of Caliban were kind of influenced by the warp to grow as big as they did. So it was kind of a double whammy of like, well, there's already the slightest bit of chaos tan on this planet already anyway.
Well, it just sounds like, I mean, to be fair, it sounds like Luther was already reasonably corrupted by chaos if they sat there debating whether to
Well,
uh,
there was like
undo.
at least a good, I think, 50 or
Isn't
100 years in between the time that Luther was banished and the time that the Lion came back. At least 50 or 100 years.
like came back after the Horus Heresy, or like
Yeah,
came
the
back
entire
undead?
the entire Horus Heresy happened, which albeit I think was only like 15 years or something, 15 to 50 years, something like that. I'm
Damn.
not quite exactly sure on the timeline of the Horus Heresy. It was very quick though, and part of the reason the Dark Angel was sent so far away is because they had such a big legion, but also the Lion's strategic genius, and then that pretty much was when Horus heard the Lion was coming back, was part of the reason why he tried to spring the trap on the Emperor in the first place, because he was just trying to rush to capture the Imperial Palace before three loyalist legions made it back to Terra.
I mean, yeah,
Which, in all
that's
fairness,
gonna be the
the
strategy.
Blood Angels made it in time. They made it like just the least bit before everything went down, and the Blood Angels were almost instrumental in winning the war. I mean, so were the Imperial Fish, which were already there and defending, but
Isn't that how Sanguinius fell? Is during the like
during the
protection of
during
Terra?
during the actual battle of the Imperial Palace, yeah, the siege of the Imperial Palace, which we are going to end the episode now. So, a bit of post correction on my part. The It turns out later in the Arcs of Omen book that they were not sent into the warp by the Chaos Gods, but it does indeed come out that the Dark Angels Homeworld of Caliban was indeed sent into the warp because of a device that was triggered in the 41st millennia by their chapter master Asriel. And along with a few other corrections, the Dark Angels color scheme during the Great Crusade was indeed a black or a quote green show dark, that it looked black. If you liked anything you heard today, or you wanted to support the podcast, go to patreon.com/MidwestHammer, and then just like, subscribe, share. Anything helps out. We're always always glad to have you, and we are going to hopefully make a video on every single legion in order. So stay tuned for that. The next episode will be on the Emperor's Children, being the third legion.
And I might have some particular squirmy surprises in the future. They can't all be legions. They can't all.
All right, and then we bid you adieu. Goodbye.
Have a good night.